All right, awesome. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining our webinar today. We're really excited to tell you a little bit more about how Google Cloud, ATB Financial, and Collibra are working together to create some very interesting solutions. So before we get started, I'll take a few seconds to go through a brief intro. We already went through the overview of the WebEx audio, so I'll skip through this, and we'll take a look at some of the things that we're going to be looking at in our agenda as we go through this today. So we'll start off with a couple of introductions of the speakers, including myself, and then we'll go through each of the different partners who we have here today. We'll start out with Google Cloud, learning a little bit about hybrid data lakes. I'll take you through an overview of Collibra and how we're creating a system of record for data, and then we'll turn it over to hear a little bit more about ATB Financial's customer story, and we'll round things out at the end with a brief Q&A. So feel free to add any questions into the Q&A chat to the right of your WebEx screen, and we'd be happy to answer them at the end of the session. So with that, I'll go through some of these quick introductions here. We've got a really great team together to talk to you about all of the different products and stories we have available to us. So we have Christopher Crosby from Google Cloud, and Chris has over 15 years of experience building out analytic applications and is currently a product manager at Google focused on building data lake tools for the Google Cloud platform. Myself, Ben Moser, I'm a product manager here at Collibra, and I work primarily within the data catalog space, spending most of my time focused on automation and machine learning and how we can make the user experience much better using those tools. And then we have Chris Ferguson, a member of ATB Financial, who's been working on database and automation projects at ATB Financial for the last 14 years, and most recently has been working on Hadoop administration and Google Cloud Platform work on security and BigQuery. So really great group of people to talk about all three of these different areas, and then to hear a really interesting story from ATB on how all of the different products here come together into a very useful end goal. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris from Google, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about Google Cloud.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ben. I appreciate that. So as Ben said, my name is Chris, and I am a product manager here at Google in our data and analytics space. Now, that means I spend a lot of time helping customers from a variety of industries understand how to apply data to more areas of their business, really dig deep into a lot of these various architectures that they've created for analyzing data. Now, lately, I've spent a lot of my time with banking. Retail bankers are going through a data-driven transformation. Data is powering retail banking, and much of it is actually customer-driven. In fact, 63%, oh, next slide, please, sorry. In fact, 63% of customers are willing to share personal data for personalized benefits. And more than half of retail banking customers are already using mobile banking. So it's no surprise that a 26% compound annual growth rate is estimated for financial services data growth from 2018 to 2025, resulting in 10 exabytes of data by 2025. And if you're not familiar with an exabyte, 10 exabytes is about 10 billion gigabytes. Next slide. So my job has been a lot of fun lately because I've gotten to work with many of these global banks with complex legacy technology stacks and are transforming them into some really innovative data architectures. And we've had outstanding success with large global retail banks, including KeyBank and HSBC, as they start to embark on their digital transformation journeys. And I think this is because we really at Google see them as joint partners in this digital transformation and are working together to delight banking customers with new technologies. Next slide, please. Now, when we first started talking with these banks, many were often facing the same challenges of struggling to get value from their on-prem data lakes. Now, I don't want to knock on-prem data lakes like Hadoop too much because they've actually done a really phenomenal job of capturing a lot more data than companies have collected in the past. However, I have found that, oftentimes these on-prem data lakes just don't quite deliver on the analytic value that could be unlocked with that data that's sitting there already. Now, just one example of that is just the high total cost of ownership that comes with technologies like Hadoop clusters. At the end of the day, you're essentially tying a very expensive resource of compute to what should be a relatively inexpensive resource of storage. And so moving to the cloud really helps break that apart, and you can get better value. That's also, it limits your scalability when you're on-prem. Now, I was talking to one financial institution, and they were telling me about a new regulation for mortgages that came out. So now, once a quarter, they have to reprocess all the data associated with the mortgage debt that's on their books. And now they had two choices. They could on-prem, but that meant they had to build out an entire data processing application to handle that peak, even though it only happens once a quarter. Or what they ended up doing was they worked with us to move to the cloud. So they had a way to burst that job to the cloud once a quarter. On-prem, it can also be really difficult to turn a compliance checklist into enforced automated controls. Now in the cloud, everything is an API and fully audited. So you can create a list of everything running and start to put your operations management on those data resources. And then if you start combining that paradigm with tools like Collibra, it's really impressive what can be done that you never thought was possible on-prem. And finally, this is the one that really hits home for me, because as an ex-data engineering manager, is a lot of these on-prem systems, they just come with so much management toil. You have all these fantastic data engineers that have deep expertise in your business and your business data, and they end up spending all of their time doing these generic installs and configurations instead of focusing on the business problems and unlocking new data. Next slide, please. So I've worked with a lot of these customers to either re-architect or migrate their on-prem data lakes into Google Cloud. Now, Google Cloud solves a lot of those challenges I've just described because we offer scalable storage, pay-as-you-go data processing, and all from a serverless environment. Now, once you can move into that framework, it really opens you up to having the time to spend integrating your business into things like the innovative AI and ML technologies that are offered by Google, or focusing on improving your security posture. Next slide, please. So customers use GCP to build data lakes because we have a lot of tools that are commonly found in data lakes. Makes sense? So whether or not it's data ingestion, data processing, data management, or data security, GCP probably has the right option for your use case. Now, I can't even begin to scratch the surface of all the offerings in this webinar, but I am going to highlight one brand new offering that's quite relevant for Collibra users. Next slide, please. We just launched into alpha a fully managed, highly available, and open source native Apache Hive Metastore service that simplifies the technical metadata management that you might have with running open source processing frameworks like Spark and Presto in Google Cloud. With this service, it's a serverless endpoint, so you don't have to manage underlying databases or web servers just to store your open source table information. And since this offering is based on a Apache Hive Metastore, it fully supports Collibra, but a lot of your other familiar friends like Apache Atlas and Apache Ranger as well. So if you're using tools today with a Hive Metastore, most likely they will be work out of the box with the Dataproc Metastore. Next slide, please. And so GCP, the idea is we provide the most robust tools and technologies to protect and govern your data throughout its life cycle. But also when you start to pair that with Collibra, who provides industry-leading data governance, you have a partnership that really brings together a best-in-class product. It's going to let you do a lot of new use cases, like you can provide customers immediate access to metadata, or you can give banks or other enterprises standard definitions, and then share those standard definitions across the organization so you can improve on collaboration and understanding how your business works across different departments. At the same time, all that collaboration, it's balanced with data ownership across the organization, so you have easy and secure access. And so this next slide, Ben, I'm going to hand back to you because I'm really excited about this partnership, and I think it's I'd like to hear more from you from the Collibra side of it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Chris, for going through that introduction. And I really love the transition here as we talk, from the Google perspective about all of the incredible tools that they're coming out with to help manage your data environments and really drive these incredibly intelligent platforms and drive data-driven decision making. I think it's always really important to remember that there is more outside of just the data that we always have to take into consideration, whether that is looking at specific governance concerns or compliance concerns or just understanding your entire environment in a really consumable way. And that is really what we're aiming to do here at Collibra. We bill ourselves as the data intelligence company because we really believe that we want to drive data-driven decision making by connecting data insights, algorithms, and really just in general knowledge that exists within an organization to data citizens across that entire organization. So whether it's being able to understand through our data catalog products where things exist within your Google Cloud platform or across all of your different systems, or whether it's understanding the governance and context around those assets and the compliance measures that you have to take into consideration, all of these things are baked into the Collibra system of record so that you can get the full picture of the information across your system, no matter what group you're in or no matter what part of the organization you're worried about. And that really shows in kind of the number of clients and the clients that we're working with currently who span all different sorts of industries, but there's really an underlying focus in the goal of understanding data better, bringing information and knowledge together into a system of record for data intelligence. You can drive data-driven decision-making as much as possible. So you can see a number of different industries represented in our client base. All of them are using Collibra to find, understand, and trust their data in a more efficient way. And they're really using it to bring IT and business users together. At Collibra, we have a really big focus on making data accessible. In many cases, when you're looking at data catalogs, data governance tools, there's a big focus on the IT user, sometimes at the expense of the everyday business analysts. At Collibra, we want to bring that knowledge and understanding to every user so we can drive data-driven decision-making from the ground up, which we believe is really essential to creating a successful data-driven business. We've been in the market for over 10 years now. We've got over 400 customers. You can see a number of them represented here, again, as I mentioned, across all different industries. And as we'll hear today from ATB Financial, we'll hear one specific use case of how Collibra and Google Cloud specifically are being used together, but there are many more use cases across multiple different industries and multiple different needs within these organizations to help understand their data and bring business users and IT users together. So just to zoom out a little bit and focus again on kind of why we're here and why Collibra is doing what we're doing to try and drive that data-driven behavior and drive that data intelligence across organizations. We've seen through our experience and through all of the studies that are out there in the market that time is not being spent the right way on data projects right now. And I'm sure many people in the audience can identify with this, but there's just plain too much time spent finding data, understanding data, preparing data, and not enough time spent driving actual insights. In a lot of cases, on top of that and compounding this problem, people don't trust their analytics. You can see 65% of decision makers don't trust their analytics. They don't understand where that information is coming from, or they can't understand and trust how they're being calculated. And a lot of employees have access to data they shouldn't. So there are tons of different problems associated with driving data-driven decision making, and they span a lot of different areas, whether it's having too much access, not having enough access, not being able to trust the information that's in front of you. And all of this is on the backdrop of something that Chris mentioned a few moments ago, which is that as we're all very closely familiar with, the amount of data out there in the world and within our organizations is growing exponentially. So how do we take all of these things into account, and how do we address all of these things in a unified way? And that's one thing that Collibra is trying to do, which we'll talk a little bit about in the ensuing slides. But before we get too deeply into that, I do want to focus on the partnership that we have with Google Cloud, and we'll talk about how this fits into the larger Collibra ecosystem. But as Chris went through and mentioned all of these different aspects of this, Google Cloud offers the best-in-class solutions for cloud computing and data storage and all of the different things that Chris was mentioning. And basically, Collibra has the ability to ingest all of that information, make it accessible, make it searchable, make it approachable in a unified way, and also to add context outside of just the data environment and an industry-leading governance framework, an industry-leading privacy and compliance framework, so that you can have total trust in all of the information, total understanding of where it's coming from, where it's going, and how it interacts with other data across your entire ecosystem. So there are a lot of really exciting things when we start to look at Google Cloud and Collibra partnering together, because we really believe that it's going to supercharge that approach to driving data-driven decision-making, which we'll talk about, of course, once we get to ATB and their customer story in a few moments. But just to round out what we're talking about here when we're thinking about Collibra and what we're trying to do and where we're going as an organization, we really like to frame it in the sense of what we call our data intelligence journey. So I've talked about, at a high level, what Collibra is trying to accomplish, why we're here, some of the things that we're seeing in the market, and this encapsulates what we have built and what we are building to solve those problems that we see in the market. And it really is focused around trusted data shopping. That is really the watchword that we continuously come back to here at Collibra. I won't go through all of the different tools and all the different products and features that we're building out and that are mentioned here on this slide, because I want to make sure that we focus on ATB and their really great customer story. But I will focus on the idea here that the journey that we are currently building and that our clients are using Collibra for is designed to encourage this idea of trusted data shopping. So by syncing everything into a Collibra environment, no matter if it's Google Cloud or if you have on-prem databases that you're trying to migrate into Google Cloud, keeping track of all of that information in one place, being able to understand all of the context around it, and being able to shop for it and treat your data as if it were a hard good in a trusted and compliant way is something that we believe is really valuable, and that's going to drive the next generation of intelligent behavior within organizations and thereby increase value substantially. And finally, just to round out the conversation here, I'll go through briefly the different products and solutions that Collibra offers. So having talked about our background, what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish, why we're here, this is how we're actually doing it. As we're trying to push through the journey of trusted data shopping and deliver tools that allow users from everyday business analysts to incredibly highly technical users to shop for data in an intelligent way, these are the tools that we're offering to accomplish that end. You can see from the bottom with all of the different data sources that we can ingest, whether it's data sources, machine learning tools, analytic tools, BI tools, all of these different sources of information, which is why we refer to ourselves as a data intelligence organization rather than just a data organization. We bring all of this information in together, store it in store the metadata and the structure of that information so that it's easily searchable across our data catalog. We've got tools such as data lineage to help you understand how everything is connected to each other within your organization and within your data environment, so that you can get that active metadata graph to understand all of the contextual information, not only from a privacy standpoint, but just from a general understanding standpoint. And then we've got other tools like data matching to help understand where duplicate data exists across your systems, data privacy to help you make sure you're staying in compliance with regulations like GDPR and CCPA, governance to ensure that you have strong structures of ownership and responsibilities across all of your different assets, and then a single source cloud-based platform to make sure that everything is scalable and available to you at any time that you need it. All of this in the effort to drive, as I've been mentioning again and again, data-driven decision-making, which we believe accelerates business outcomes, as we've seen in so many of our different clients. So with that, having given a general overview of Collibra, obviously we've gone through an overview of Google Cloud and the tools that they're offering as well. we're going to transition now into our customer story here, and I'm going to pass it over to Chris Ferguson, who's going to talk a little bit about ATB Financial and how they're using Collibra and Google Cloud to drive success in their business.
Thank you very much, Ben. My name is Chris Ferguson from ATB Financial. I've worked for ATB for about 14 years doing various IT projects, usually on the admin or database development side. What I'd like to share with you is our story of integrating Collibra with our choice to go to BigQuery in Google's cloud platform. So a little bit about us as a company. We're a regional bank in Alberta. Just as a point of history, we got started back in the 30s to deal with the economic crisis of the day. We have about 750,000 customers and about 5,000 to 6,000 employees, depending on the year. So we would be categorized as a mid-sized financial institution. So a little bit of backstory on our IT journey. Like a lot of banks, we started with many disparate systems that came in and were poorly integrated. We had knowledge about how data flowed through our systems was often tied up in terms of individuals, at least in terms of a broad view overall. We purchased Collibra a number of years ago in order to try to solve that problem. It was a fantastic solution for us in enabling us to track source and lineage and classification of our data in a central location as opposed to various disparate data governance repositories. And in 2019, we made the decision that we wanted to modernize in a serious way and to go beyond the capabilities of our legacy environment and to step into the cloud platform for a number of reasons. So, to be honest, the number one selling feature of the cloud for us, at least, was originally power. We, as a mid-sized company, we can't afford to have a Hadoop cluster of, say, 300 nodes or something like that. So we were never able to match the power of the managed service that BigQuery provides for us. Just as an example, we had one query that was a financial reporting query that took about, I think it was 8 hours to run on our existing system, and I think Google ran it in 23 minutes the first time we tried it, so it was substantial. Now, it's not just power, or it's more like it's power to cost, because not only do we get this tremendous power, but we actually get it, from our perspective, at a discount. Because of the managed service model, we're not paying licensing fees or spending our IT time to Christopher's point, spending our IT time, patching services or managing, ports and things on individual machines or adding hard drives. So there was a huge cost savings in a number of ways to realize. I mean, as a personal thing, our company's experience is just from getting rid of licensing fees for some of our legacy technology is actually paying largely for our entire Google Cloud experience. Stability. Google has a managed service. It's very stable. They handle problems in the data center, and they will, for a minor fee, they will replicate your data across the continent. I mean, as a mid-sized company, that's a very expensive trick for us to manage, but Google will sell us this wonderful service at a premium. Capability. We can access it from anywhere. It's up all the time, and it reduces our overhead in a major way. And security. Cloud has great auditing. Everything in Google is encrypted, and it's a very secure platform, especially when you consider the uniformity of Google's cloud platform and its encryption and security protocols compared to the variety of legacy systems that we're replacing it with of various grades of security and stability. So here's the problem, though. this is all new to us. We're a mid-sized company. We didn't have a presence or at least a major presence in the cloud before. So we have no training. Well, not no training. That's not true. But we're coming in cold to this. We don't have any great background. And will Collibra help us to support this? It's never been done. But there comes a point where you have to just do it, right? If we're going to be aggressive, if we're going to embrace this new technology and its benefits, then we have to be bold. So we forge forward, like many mid-sized companies do. You just make a decision to do it. Now, Collibra is a great partner for us in that they help us with all of these points: improve deployment and faster time to delivery, managing our data, having a central place to store our data or to store our metadata, our lineage, which was a huge problem for us before. Where does data come from? Where does it go to? Where can I go to get this information? And having that central repository is very helpful to us, whether we're in the cloud or not. This is just Collibra in general. It allows us to recover from problems. If we have to restore a system or a table or something like that, we know we have a central place for its classifications for both security and lineage and what needs to hook up to it and all the rest. So Collibra has actually become, since we've purchased the product, part of our disaster recovery plans, which has been very helpful to us. Now, within our particular data environment, we want to rapidly ingest our records. We want to be able to categorize them in an efficient way. We want to reduce some of the manual work of categorizing this data. And we want to ultimately drive dynamic masking. So our model, or the model that we wanted to do, was instead of having people get access to systems based on their request, we wanted to have a data warehouse, a data lake, where all employees get access to it, but their access is controlled and limited by their roles. So we mask things on a columnar basis so that we can manage security. And that brings us to our next slide. So the way that we do this is we use Collibra through Google's APIs to ingest data from BigQuery to recognize when tables have been created or views, to ingest them, to analyze and categorize them, to store the lineage about them, and then to regurgitate those security classifications back up into Google's data catalog product so that we can then use those tags to control our dynamic masking. So that allows us to have a data warehouse where we can let employees in, where data is categorized at the columnar level, where we can trust that people won't have access to things that are either sensitive based on their role or that are simply not categorized yet. Our particular integration does not rely, or rather it fails safe. If our data governance does not categorize the data, then the data does not get exposed, in making it a very safe environment for sharing sensitive data. So when we use Collibra, the idea is to have it automate this classification for us so that we can keep the data flow rolling. We don't want to have long manual stoppages between when data is ingested and when we expose it to our user base, or at least we don't want any longer than necessary. So Collibra imports it and allows us to work its magic on classifying the data largely based on lineage. So all the data in our data warehouse or our data lake our Google BigQuery environment come from other sources, and in many cases, those other sources have been categorized, or the source systems have been categorized. So Google can help us to, Collibra can help us to retain these classifications and to reapply them to new data if appropriate. Once Collibra has done that work, we can have various workflows attached to the data. We can use that data for other programs and processes like Tableau, which we are making major use of as a reporting tool. And again, to push these classifications through Data Catalog to our dynamic masking solution. So, as of May 2020, when most of this was rated, we have more or less completed almost all of our desired Collibra integration. We have our dynamic masking solution up and running. We have a production environment where all of our employees have access to. We have integration with the data catalog, and we are completing the last bit of integration we're completing is Collibra's automatic ingestion and categorization. There's still a little bit of manual work on our end there, but largely we have this solution. I mean, between when data is created, a new table or a new view is created, and a security view is created and categorized, is down to a day or in hours. Now, we hope once the automation on our end is fully complete, we will get this cycle down to about an hour to 2 hours between when data is first ingested or created with a new view and when it can be categorized and exposed to our user base. We essentially accomplished this, and we did it in about 6-7 months. And the only reason we were able to do that was because our Google Cloud platform allows us to focus our IT efforts on loading data, on developing applications, on testing, on meeting the needs of our user base, rather than grunt work tasks like, updating libraries or loading virus checks or any of the other things that we would normally be spending our time doing, adding hard drives, all those mundane tasks. And so that brings us to, I guess, the reasons for doing this, right? We're taking our best-in-class data warehouse, our BigQuery, which has some of the best cost performance in the industry. We're combining it with our APIs Google's APIs to provide integration with Collibra, which has our metadata and our security classifications for data throughout all our systems as it flows through the company, not just into our BigQuery environment. And we're combining them into a rapid deployment solution for our analysts, for our staff, so that they can explore the data more or less on demand. And that's it for my section.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. And thanks to both Chris's for joining us today. So we're going to switch over now to the Q&A. Of course, as we're going through this, we already have some questions coming in, but if anybody in the audience has any questions that they'd like to ask anyone here, please feel free to add them into the Q&A section in WebEx. But we'll get started with a couple of questions for you, Chris Ferguson. After having heard and gone through this example of what you guys are doing over there at ATB Financial, I think it would be really helpful for some of the people on the call to know, if they're just getting started on something like this, or if they're just getting started on an integration like this, do you have any advice, in general for how to get these projects started, or how to get alignment, and then more specifically on how to set up workflows within Collibra?
The actual detailed work on Collibra is I actually tend to focus more on the data platform side. But I can tell you that when we started this project, we actually went through several iterations. Like a lot of companies, to Chris's point, we started out with an on-prem Hadoop cluster, and so when we really compared what we were getting from our on-prem Hadoop cluster to what Google and BigQuery were offering us, there was no comparison. Essentially, we did not have the resources ever to make them comparable in terms of power or cost efficiency. One of the things that was really necessary, there was actually two things. We were very lucky in our initial stages because we had a management that understood that there would be some failure with this process, and so learning to embrace a little bit of failure, or at least failure as a transitive or a transformative thing, was fantastic, because we did try a few things. We didn't get going right away. We had little hiccups, but we had a management that was committed to the vision, and that helped tremendously. The second thing was that we needed to think bold. When you go to the cloud, and this is really important, you really shouldn't be looking just to ideally replace your existing environment, right? The justification for going to the cloud shouldn't be I'm saving 30 or 50% cost right now, although that's a great justification. I'm happy with that. But it really should be, where do I see my future? And so when we looked down the road at our own future, what we saw was that our legacy environments weren't really going to get us to where we wanted to be. And so again, that was that vision of the future to drive the project was critical.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So now a question coming in for you, Chris Crosby. I'm sure it sounds like people are excited about this DataProc Metastore that you are announcing and releasing in alpha here. So there's a question coming through about if it's available today and how can one go about getting access if it is, or if not, what's the plan for the release cycle on that?
Yeah, I love the question. So it is available for testing today. Google Cloud typically has what we call release phases. So we will put things in a testing scenario, but that is going to be an allow list. So what you can do is you can email join DataProc Metastore Alpha at google.com, and we can get you in. Or feel free to go through your Google sales rep, and we can also get you in that way. And if you forget that address, just if you do a Google search for DataProc Metastore, there was a recent blog post that went out that also explains a little bit more about the Metastore, as well as that email address again for reaching out and getting access. But we would love to have you, give it a shot for alpha testing.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So a couple more questions coming in. So this one is for Chris Ferguson. Besides the acquisition cost of tools and services, what was the investment in terms of people and time to carry out this integration and build out these tools? And then how many stewards do you have on your team, or how many stewards were required for this?
In terms of the initial team, we actually had a platform team of about 12 people, and that includes our architects, myself, some people handling various other things, including what took a while on ours was getting our security department to be comfortable with what we were doing. That was part of it. So there's about 10 people, 12 people there, depending on the time frame. And there was the largest groups were the data ingesters. So we had about 3 groups, each of about an additional 8 to 12 people that were tasked with ingesting data from our various source environments into the BigQuery platform. Now, we also have a data governance team, which was handling the Collibra side and the classification of our data, and they started out 6, but that wasn't adequate. We actually have them up at 10, including some developers who are working on integration. So that's about 50 people in total, but a lot of that was like I said, the bulk of that was ingestion.
Got it. Awesome. And then another question here for you. Do you have plans to automate serving data sets up to business users requesting data in the data marketplace?
I mean, in terms of internal employees, they already have it, right? But in terms of external partners, I think that's where the question is directed. We absolutely are working on integrations with a number of other groups. And we don't have that integration completely in place. The problem you get with a lot of external partners is they have unique needs. So one size fits all solution doesn't always drop into place. We are trying to find commonalities with them. Having an environment with standardized API and REST protocols helps enormously in this. Most vendors do support Google's REST protocols, which helps enormously.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And then let's see. It looks like we've got a couple of questions coming in for Collibra, which I can handle here. Some of them have to do with sources that Collibra integrates with. So we've got one question: does Collibra work with all cloud providers or only Google? So this is a great question. This gets to some of the value that Collibra is really driving, is that we are by default kind of provider agnostic. So we're very excited and always love building out connections with the people at Google Cloud. But in some cases, you're going to have a much more complicated environment in which you have multiple cloud providers potentially, or if you're in between, transitions, or you have non-cloud providers, some on-prem data sources, or some private sources that you want to integrate into a solution. And Collibra kind of takes all comers when it comes to that perspective. So regardless of the system that you're using or the tools that you're using, Collibra has the ability to integrate that information into the unified system of record, which is something that can be very valuable. We talk a lot about at Collibra being a catalog of catalogs. So in some cases, if you have multiple individual catalogs, you still want to be able to keep track of them across your entire organizations, which is very valuable. And one of the great things about Collibra is that even for sources that we don't have direct integrations with, we have a very flexible operating model and a very flexible ingestion system, so that we allow you to bring information even if we don't necessarily work with it out of the box. So some people have some custom solutions, or they've wanted to create custom assets for machine learning models, things of that nature, and that's totally possible within Collibra as well. So we also have a question about integration with Power BI. So BI tools is something that I mentioned, I believe, in my my introduction of Collibra. We don't just want to have a solution that shows you where all of your data is. We want to have a solution that shows you where anything connected to data is. So Collibra does ingest information from BI providers as well, and ingest the lineage from those providers in addition to just the actual assets that exist there. So for tools like Power BI and Tableau, yes, you can ingest that information, connect it through lineage to the data sources that exist within Collibra, so that you can get a full view of your data environment and understand how all the data is flowing to and from your reports. So keep going through the question list here. So let's see. Question about automating creation of data sets. So can Collibra automate the creation of data set, or does the data set already have to be defined? Another great question. And I think one of the things that I love about Chris Ferguson's presentation here at ATB Financial is it shows really the power of how you can kind of customize the behavior within Collibra. So there is the ability to ingest data sets that have already been defined within an environment, but using things like the workflow tools within Collibra, you absolutely can build in approaches and workflows that define data sets on the fly based on, a classification that may have been added in a tool like Google Cloud, or based on something like a data classification that is automatically generated in Collibra. All of these things can be used as inputs to kind of automate the creation of data sets in any way you really see fit. It's a very flexible environment in general.
Sorry, Ben, just to jump in very quickly.
Sure.
At ATB, just in our particular implementation, the data sets exist, and then Collibra categorizes them. So that's not that we had to do that; it was just a design choice on our end for practical purpose.
Very useful. And then, Chris Ferguson, one more question for you. Obviously, a very important one. How are you able to demonstrate the value of this integration internally?
Right now, we are still onboarding, not so much the idea of does the data environment exist, but getting the company in and using it and migrating our reporting to it now that the platform is set up. So in terms of a total end user analysis, we haven't yet got enough data to do that from our organization. We can justify it, though, in terms of cost and in terms of effort. So to set this up in another environment, so just as a little background, we have a lot of SAP infrastructure at ATB Financial. If we were to have done the same thing in, say, SAP's products like HANA or something like that, or other things, it would have taken us easily twice as long. We spent about a year with Hadoop, for instance, doing various things, trying to get to the same point. So we can justify it in terms of cost, in terms of speed of delivery, and we can justify it in terms of cost right now in terms of total actual cost. I mean, the currency of the realm is in essence the currency of the realm. The amount that we're saving on just licensing fees alone is basically paying for our environment. So for us already, it's been a substantial cost saver. Now, we do hope to be able to justify it in terms of improved, not just improved user experience, but in terms of improved user productivity. But we haven't got the full company onto this platform yet, and so we can't. I can't, comment authoritatively about that at this time.
Got it. And I guess that may have answered, but I don't know if you want to expand on this a little bit. Another question that we had that came in that was really around the relationship between your team and the larger business at ATB. Maybe not speaking directly about value demonstration, but just in general, what's the relationship like between your team and the rest of the business? What sorts of partnerships have you built? And do you have any advice for people who are trying to build those same bridges right now?
Yeah, absolutely. My specific team is still responsible for not only the platform itself and its, investigating instabilities and expanding out sort of the base feature sets and things, but of also assisting with integration with our third-party vendors, which is work that, now we've got the base platform up, that third-party integration is proceeding, in a number of areas that we need to have happen. What we are probably our true value, though, and this is from a user perspective, is when things go wrong, users need someplace they can go to get those complex questions answered. And so there's still, the story is still one from the user's end of essentially hidden complexity. They don't realize what goes into these environments to make them work and how best to use them necessarily. But if they have a central group that they know who to ask, it's tremendously comforting and tremendously productive for them. So to be honest with you, my greatest value is probably, and this is weird to say, but it's true, is probably fielding off-the-cuff questions from users and groups who are trying to get into this, who are frustrated, but who can do this, and they need a little help, and they need a body of expertise that they can rely on, and they need it in human form, because for some reason our users hate reading documentation. I don't know why. Maybe your users are similar, but we've coalesced our particular group is the body of expertise that gets consulted. So that alone has enormous value to the rest of the company. It helps. I mean, we can't make this work without the buy-in, and that central body of expertise helps enormously with that.
Yeah, that's great. I think pretty much every group in the world gets a little bit frustrated with documentation sometimes. So until we've got a general artificial intelligence, I think we'll always need that human touch. All right. So it looks like we have come to the end of the majority of the questions here. There are a couple of others that have some kind of longer answers that we definitely want to follow up on, but we think probably require a little bit more of a detailed session. So just a little note on operationally, as we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we've been recording this webinar, so we will send out a recording to everybody who's joined, and we will also send out a copy of the Q&A as well as the answers that were given today by our panelists here. So with that, I just want to thank everyone who has joined us. Obviously, thank our panelists as well, Chris Ferguson from ATB Financial, Chris Crosby from Google Cloud. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was really insightful, and we look forward to having more conversations again in the future. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you on behalf of ATB Financial.